Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidyadravindam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we are in the 14th chapter, and I think, Mark, you said we're on the 9th verse.
Yes.
So we're in the chapter on the yoga of the three gunas. Tamas, the principle of inactivity. Rajas, the principle of activity. Sattva, the principle of non-activity. Will you help us out, please, Shweta?
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, very well.
Satyam sukhe sanjyati raja karmani bharata jnanam avratya tu tamaha pramade sanjaya yuta. Sattva attaches to happiness, rajas to action, O Bharata, while tamas, verily, shrouding knowledge, attaches to heedlessness.
So when we have mixed sattva, meaning there's still a tinge of some rajas and tamas, meaning there's still a little ignorance, we get attached to happiness. So this can be something as simple as we shun the world because we're afraid it's going to rob us of our tranquility. Oh, I have to live out in the country because the city upsets me too much. Or I won't watch movies because they aggravate my mind. I never watch the news because it upsets me. I can't stand to see this or that. I won't associate with these people or those people because it robs me of my tranquility. So we get attached to this because we have yet to see the self in and through the world. The person of steady wisdom is at home anywhere. Rajas, of course, we're attached to activity. This is when I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, I'm ambitious, I have envy, I have jealousy, I have competition, all these kinds of things. And of course, those who are attached to heedlessness are those people who avoid the world with unconsciousness. I was talking with people, I guess it was a couple days ago. If you yourself or you know another person who suffered from clinical depression, one of the symptoms is you want to sleep all the time, 12, 14 hours a day. That's a sign that some people use to diagnose clinical depression. It is craving unconsciousness. So that depressed mind is a tamasic mind. And there are people who crave numbing themselves out, drugs, alcohol. It can be other things like binging on Netflix, food, sex. I do anything to not feel my feelings. So this is, and there are cultures that are largely tamasic. Oh, manana. Many third world countries where there's been a lot of colonial oppression. The cultures can be tamasic. There's no drive, there's no ambition. Now, here in the West, we're a rajasic culture. It's all about getting stuff. Swamiji used to talk about how the West may have a high standard of living, but they do not have a high standard of life. I can't tell you how many of my friends are in IT. And if they want to excel and get promoted at work, they are required to put in 60 hours a week of work. Rajas. And then we've talked about sattvic cultures. One of the things that was very beautiful about Buddhism in Tibet, they actually had a minister of happiness. Can you believe it? So the whole culture, even though economically it was feudal, the deep pervasiveness of Buddhism in the culture. I wasn't there. This is what a lot of people say about Tibet under the Buddhist regimes, was that it was a happy place. All right, any questions about these three gunas and how it's possible to get attached to any one of them? So the lesson here is we want to stand back and be beyond the gunas. So if you wake up in the morning and you've got a touch of the flu, you're going to have probably a tamasic mind and body. And not fret with it. Be able to be present to it. Or if your life circumstances are such that you have many responsibilities, you have a rajasic mind. Work. But you're not attached to it. And if you have moments where you can spend time in deep meditation, chanting the name of the Lord, studying scripture, enjoy. But don't be attached, because life moves on. Any questions about this?
I have a question, Jim.
Please.
So this description you gave of people who are trying to avoid unpleasant situations, news, and so on. So to some extent, I find myself doing that, where I think that certain situations agitate me a lot. And I'm wondering what is the wisest way to approach those. on one hand, avoiding them seems like running away, but on the other hand, you know, being in them does agitate the mind, and I feel it only takes me backwards. So, what would be a intelligent way to look at this?
Let me share with you a real story. So there was a Swami, I won't mention his name, a good friend of mine in the Chinmaya mission, and he was working with a lot of the young people, and the young people kept using the word fuck, and he was really put off by this. But rather than seeing that the problem was external, this was just the language the young people used, he realized he had an aversion. So he sat down and took pen to paper and he wrote that word 108 times until it no longer agitated him. It's just a word, it's just a sound. Fully.
So, you're suggesting leaning in.
So, what I'm saying is if watching the news agitates you, try watching the news and not getting identified. It's just a story. It's just a bunch of funny people screaming and yelling at each other.
I mean, those parts are not that hard, but the images of the kids dying and so on are much harder.
Sweetheart, everybody dies. Who suffers more? An 8-year-old who gets killed by a bomb in Gaza, or somebody who spends 4 years in assisted living with a stroke and has bed sores and can't communicate, can't even sit up? Gore, we've got to understand that's just what's inside the body. We've got to be able to look at the world, see it for what it is. Now, this is a true story. Way back in the 1970s, there was a Tibetan Buddhist monk. His name was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And he came here to the Bay Area, and he was going to do a Tibetan Tantra workshop. People are, oh, Tantra. Oh, this is going to be cool. Hundreds of people signed up for this. So it was at the UC Berkeley campus. So they all file into, he had, read in one of the lecture halls. And for an entire week, 8 hours a day, he showed them films of autopsies. Because the essence was, this is what a human body is, and quit reacting to it. Death is an inevitability. Get over it. The body is filled with blood and muscle and guts and all that sort of stuff. This is what it really is. This is the essence of Tantra. Work with the energy. And by the end of the 8 days, the people were not repulsed by the pictures. Now, mind you, Shweta, I'm not saying that there's not terrible injustice going on, for example, in Gaza. But as yogis, what we want to be is solution-oriented. Being upset and wringing our hands is not a solution to anything. Is this useful?
Yes, Jim, I need to work on this more.
You and all of us. You and all of us.
To be honest, I wonder if I make progress on this issue. I feel like I have had this issue for years and years, and I don't know that I'm making much progress.
Well, you've probably had it for lifetimes. I certainly have. At the end of the 6th chapter, Arjun says, oh, Krishna, trying to control the mind is like trying to control the wind. And Krishna says, that's true, but it can be done through practice. So
But in life situations, I mean, I'm sorry, am I holding up the class? Should I take this?
Yeah, you people on Zoom, how many of you have the same issue as Shweta?
I do.
Can you see them raising their hands?
You're not alone.
Yep.
Yeah. Welcome to the human condition, Shweta. But the thing we have to know is our negative reactions and our tendency to avoid what is unpleasant is never a solution. So again, let's use Gaza as an example. Has your avoidance of seeing the news helped the children in Gaza in any way?
No, but it might help, for instance, if I'm not sort of depressed about this, then it might help my own students that I meet. Like I'm able to be in a better place and be there at least for those that are. I'm just trying to, I'm not justifying anything. I'm just trying to say.
Do your best. Just do your best. But the principle is, it's a spiritual axiom that if I am disturbed, no matter the cause, I'm the one with the klesha. I'm the one with the dosha. And the solution is don't just do something, sit there. Do our best to not avoid negative emotions, but to fully experience them, see them for what they are, not resist or deny or negate or push them away because they're rugged and raw. Doesn't mean go out and punch people. It means be present to them. And that's not easy, but that's the work. That's the work. All right, enough on this topic. And believe me, Shweta, this is the human condition. This is sadhana. Next verse.
रजस्तमश्च विभूय सत्वं भवति भारत रजसत्वं तमश्चैव तमः सत्वं रजस्तथा. Now sattva rises. Sorry, what? Now sattva rises, prevails, O Bharata, having overpowered rajas and tamas. Now rajas, having overpowered sattva and inertia, tamas, and inertia, tamas, having overpowered sattva and rajas.
So, what Krishna is saying here is the mind itself moves through the three gunas. I like to use pizza as the best example of it. So it's dinner time and I'm too lazy to cook and I want, I'm gonna order out some pizza. So I get on my phone and I order the pizza. I'm in a rajasic mind state. And always takes far too long for the pizza to arrive. Finally, the doorbell rings. Fellow comes up, I give him the money, tip him, take the box of pizza, I open it up, and it's too hot, it's too hot, it's too hot. I put a little extra Parmesan cheese on it. Finally, I get my pizza. You never eat a pizza with knife and fork. That's not American. Sattva. Rajas turns the sattva, experiencing happiness. Then I have 2 or 3 more pieces, and then what happens? Tamas. My mind cycled through it. Rajas, sattva, tamas. Then what happens? Chocolate ice cream, dessert. Rajas, eat the ice cream. Sattva. So if we pay attention to the mind as we move through things, I'm not saying to change any of our behavior at this point. We just watch the mind. It's a rainy day and it's cold and dreary, and you get up and you don't feel very well. Tamas. But what's going to happen? It will pass. Now, some of us are afflicted with clinical mood disorders. We have depression. And when we're in it, it feels like it's always going to be this way. But actually, it always changes. Or I get what I want and everything's working. I've got cash and prizes in life. And it's sattva. It always changes. So we watch the 3 gunas play, and we can learn an awful lot about our own minds, what works and doesn't work in life, by watching the play, the rotation of the gunas. I have desire, rajas, I satisfy the desire, sattva for a moment, then unconsciousness, tamas, other God desire arises. That cycle. Next verse.
सर्वद्वारेषु देहेऽस्मिन् प्रकाशा उपजायते ज्ञानं यदा तदा विद्यात् विवृधां सत्त्वम् इत्युता. When through every gate, sense, in this body, the light of intelligence shines, then it may be known that sattva is predominant.
So when all my judgments, all my opinions have been set aside, and I simply see the world as it is, without any need to avoid it, without any need to fix it, without any need to get away from it, then the mind is sattvic. If I set aside the dead past, stay out of the unborn future, tune up the mind, just look around and see what is. Without that inner dialogue of stories going on all the time. This is sattva. Any thoughts on this? So we practice this. So you can do something like walk through a park. That's somewhat quiet. How to keep your mind in meditation. Just you see a bush, you see a twig, you see a candy wrapper on the ground, you see dogs and children playing. You see a squirrel running up a tree. See if you can just see it without all the story. Our minds usually super. Practicing the sattvic mind. Next verse.
लोभ प्रवृत्तिरारम्भ कर्मणाम समास्पृहा रजस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे भरतर्षभ. Greed, activity, undertaking of actions, restlessness, longing. These arise when Rajas is predominant, O best of the Bharata family.
Yes. So when the mind is essentially restless and irritable and discontent, and I don't know what's wrong, but I need something to fix me or fix the world. I want this. I want to get rid of that. I'm dissatisfied. This is the essence of the rajas. And all of our suffering is in the rajasic state. We're constantly discontent. It's the rajasic mind. Any thoughts on this? The essence of the rajasic mind is when my ignorance tells me what's wrong with my life is I don't have what I want. That's a lie. That's the delusion of the rajas. Next verse.
अप्रकाशो प्रवृत्तिश्च प्रमादो मोह एव च तमस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे कुरु नानन्दन. Darkness, inertness, heedlessness, and delusion. These arise when tamas is predominant, O descendant of Guru.
Yes. So when the mind is tamasic, it is dull, covered by ignorance, heedless, delusion. I do not see what's going on. Illusion. I project things that aren't really there. How many times have we perhaps been convinced that maybe people at work don't like us? Or someone does something that offends us, not to offend us, but we're convinced it's personal. How could they say or do that to me? That's tamas. And we do our best to be inactive. In the very first chapter, Arjun's out there in the middle of the two armies, and he says, "Oh my gosh, there's my cousins and my grandfather and my archery guru, Drona. Oh my God." And not only that, their army's bigger. I don't know what to do. I know what I'll do. I'll go to the forest and meditate. That's not true sattva. That's tamas. Mind is afflicted by fear, delusion, illusion, confused as to his duty, and he wants to run away from life. course, as I mentioned earlier, addiction and alcoholism is an extreme form of this. I don't know if we have it so much in India, but it's certainly something that was true in my generation. All of us hippies, we wanted to get away from the world, to drop out, avoid the problems that were around. Any thoughts on the quality of tamas?
Hi, Jim. This is Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi. In previous classes, I believe you said the anecdote to tamas is action. Is that correct?
We'll get to that. It's very difficult to move the mind directly from tamas to sattva. You're absolutely right. What we tend to need to do is move the mind from tamas to rajas. Let me give you a real live example. I've done this with too many students to count. So I had a young man, and he, again, was an alcoholic in early recovery, and he had what I would call an alcoholic's job. He had a bachelor's degree from a very good college, fabulous singer, beautiful God-given voice. And he was working as an academic administrator up at the Graduate Theological Union for a school whose theology he didn't even believe in. It was just a job where he didn't have to work very hard. He was paid practically minimum wage. He was living at home with his mother, and he hated his life. Thomas. So as he sat here on the couch, I said to him, if you had all the money in the world and all the connections in the world and all the training in the world, what would you be doing with your life? He didn't miss a beat. He said, I'd sing. So I said to him, why the hell aren't you doing it then? Started to make the shift. Now, this is maybe 7, 8 years later. He's finishing up a master's degree in performance, which he got on a scholarship at Dartmouth University. He's decided he loves working in academia in the fine arts. He's going on for a doctorate in it. He loves experimental theater. The Academy is a great place to do that. He's fulfilling his dreams. He's fulfilling his dreams. So is that useful, Sheila?
Yes, that is. But what if he doesn't fulfill his dreams? Like he doesn't make money?
Chances are most of us won't fulfill the absolute of our dreams. So as we learned in the earlier part of Gita, back in chapters 3, 4, and 5, act, O Arjuna, how, according to our Swadharma, our inherent latent proclivities for this young man, music, in the spirit of sacrifice, yajna. It's not about being a celebrity, it's about being a musician. He found that he gave up his dream to be a star on Broadway. What he'd rather do is devote himself to music itself. But then you have to give up your attachment to the fruits of action. And in the end, our renunciation of the sense of agency. It's guna and karma that will take us where we need to go.
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you, Jim.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, what will happen for most of us? There's another story I like to tell. Many of you may remember the great Italian tenor Luciano Pavarotti. His heart's desire, and he had the talent to be the world's greatest tenor. He got there, and then he went into a deep depression because his mind told him, when I'm acknowledged as the world's greatest tenor, then it'll all be different and I'll be happy. And, you know, the applause, the big paycheck, the reviews, but you still go home and you have your life. And he went into a terrible depression. And then one winter, he was flying into the Milan airport in the middle of winter. And the airplane skidded on the icy runway and crashed and split into two. And there were people killed in the crash. He was on the plane. And the next thing you know, he's helping people, rescuing them, helping them get off the plane in the crash. And it was life-changing for him. From that moment on, he continued his life as a performer, but he added to it this life of service. He started all these training programs for young singers. There was another great opera singer, Jose Carreras, who had had cancer. And he was in remission from his cancer through chemotherapy, but it had devastated his health. He was unable to perform an entire operatic role. He didn't have the strength anymore. So Pavarotti started the three tenors. You may remember that. It was him, it was Placido Domingo, and Jose Carreras. And Carreras was able to sing parts of arias. It was still a beautiful voice. But the whole thing was to help Carreras make a living. So he wasn't in poverty. These are the things that Pavarotti started to do. And it was a near-death experience that caused that shift. So he began to move from the rajas into more sattvic things in life. Is that useful?
Yes, it sounds very solution oriented. So definitely.
It is. These are real stories about how people use this principle. You move from tamas into rajas, rajas into sattva. That's why Swamiji used to thunder, serve the society, serve something greater than your own ego. And unfortunately, around the Chinmaya mission today, 31 years later, I can't tell you how much greed and materialism I see. And it saddens me. None of my business, but it's there. People who have lost the sight of Swamiji's vision. Next verse.
Yada sattve pravriddhi tu pralayam yati dehabhrit tadomam vidalokana amalam pratipadyate. If the embodied one meets with death when sattva is predominant, then he attains to the spotless worlds of the knowers of the highest.
So now Krishna's talking about what I call the set of the soul at the time of death. Now, some people have a simplistic interpretation of a lot of this. So, I've got to be in deep meditation and chanting my mantra when I die, or I'm screwed. You know, what if I'm under anesthetic, or I've got cancer and I'm totally loaded on morphine? Am I doomed? No. We build the set of the soul through a lifetime. And at the moment of death, the body drops away and the grosser parts of the mind drop away. And then we get what I call the life judgment. No one's telling us you're a bad person. But our whole life it passes before us, and we get to look at our choices. And we see the titles that we got, the careers we had, the money we acquired was meaningless. But those simple acts of kindness to another person, acts of real generosity, incredibly. And we build this set of the soul by the punya, the merit that we accrue in a lifetime. Simple acts of generosity, of kindness, of abandonment of ease. And if we're not fully realized, but we're predominantly sattvic, then we go to Punya Loka. This is all set out in the Prashna Upanishad. And at the end of the age, we're liberated, or we then are reincarnated into a family of noble folk and continue our yoga. So this is the destiny of a person whose mind is predominantly sattvic through life. So don't be concerned if a loved one has cancer, for example, and they have heavy doses of morphine. None of that, that's not really that's a too literalistic understanding of this part of the teaching. Some people think, oh, you need to be fully conscious and sattvic at the time of death. And you don't get brownie points for being in excruciating pain. Be reasonable. It's not at the very moment of death. It's what set of the soul is that we build through a lifetime. Any questions about this? Next verse.
रजसी प्रलयं गत्वा कर्मसङ्गीषु जायते तथा प्रलीनस्तमसि मूढ्योनिषु जायते. Meeting death in Rajas, he is born among those attached to action. Dying in Tamas, he is born in the womb of the senseless.
Yes. So if the vast majority of our actions are meritorious, we go to Swarga, the heaven realms, Punya Loka, the meritorious realms. If, on the other hand, we've made bad choices, then we go to Naraka, the hell realms, where we continue to suffer. But both Swarga and Naraka are temporary. In time, we come back to Manushaloka, the world of people. We incarnate. What determines the life we are born into? There are no accidents. At some level, we chose the parents we have. We chose the gender of the body. We chose the culture we were born into. We chose whether or not we would have privilege or not. In order to garner experience we thought we need to have and to fulfill desires. Sometimes we may have deep regrets from a prior life. So that, again, will become material that we bring in that will color the shape of the life that we have. There are no accidents. Now listen very carefully. In this life, we do not get what we want. We do not get what we need. We get the inevitable results of the force of the past through lifetimes as it interacts with the society at large, the greater karmic environment. And as we've gone through all the things that we've gone through, there's no mistakes. And if, for example, we have a dysfunctional family of origin, and there's been a lot of suffering, the scriptures invite us to practice titiksha. Who can tell me what titiksha is?
Forbearance.
Yes. Forbearance is not about some dumb endurance. I'm a martyr. Look what I suffer. I will endure. That's not titiksha. Titiksha is a deep understanding of karma. I won't get what I want. Frankly, I sometimes don't even get what I need. I get the inevitable force of my past actions, and it's exacting. So today, I'm going over to San Francisco to see a chamber concert. So as we're moving towards the bridge, there's, at least half a dozen lines of cars, very heavy traffic. Why are all they moving faster and ours is slow? Karma. Nobody made a mistake. For all I know, I drove an ox cart in a prior life and traffic backed up behind me. I don't know. But there are no accidents. So the yogi, knowing that what I experience is the inevitable result of my own past actions as it interfaces with the larger society. The point of power, listen carefully, that's what I call it. The point of power is how I choose to respond rather than react. Can I drop ego's desire for redress and revenge, to fight people, to hurt people, and instead practice acceptance, generosity, forgiveness? Nobody is a victim. Now listen carefully. That doesn't mean there's a God up there in the sky punishing us for our bad actions. That is a wrong understanding. If someone drops LSD and goes to the top of my building and thinks he can fly and jumps off and smashes himself on the sidewalk, gravity isn't punishing him. He's stupid. deluded. You and I, for lifetimes, stupid choices. You know something? I've made a lot of them in this lifetime. I don't know about you. We don't get what we want. We don't get what we need. We get the inevitable result of the force of the past as it interacts with society. What do I mean by that? So my stock portfolio, my IRAs, went down in value last week. It wasn't just my past karma. The whole stock market went down. So it interfaces with the society at large. Those of you in this country who drive cars, did gas go up in your area? Walt, did gas go up where you live?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. It went up everywhere because of problems in the Middle East. So we live in a larger karmic environment as well. So the point of power is how we choose to respond. Not regretting that calamity is happening, not punishing ourselves, not blaming other people, but can I match calamity with serenity? Be solution-oriented. As the Master Jesus said, return good for evil. Turn the other cheek, etc. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
कर्मणः सुकृत स्याहुः सात्विकं निर्मलं फलं रजस्तु फलं दुःखम् अज्ञानं तमसः फलम्. The fruit of good action, they say, is sattvic and pure. Verily, the fruit of rajas is pain, and the fruit of tamas is ignorance.
So now Krishna furthers this idea of the karmic response, the karma phala, the fruit of the action. So if I'm in a sattvic mind and I'm doing esteemable actions, first of all, I will build some self-esteem. If I'm virtuous in the world, that kind of stuff comes back to me. In time, my life starts to become peaceful and fruitful. If, on the other hand, my mind is rajasic, and I'm competing with people, and I'm angry, and I'm climbing the ladder by stepping on others, and the universe fights back. I have a sometime student who has had a psychological condition, I think the therapists call it compulsive defiance disorder. If he's ever challenged, he escalates. And I cannot tell you how many times he's gotten into fights with people on public transportation. He's been thrown off of buses by the driver for escalating. He got into a fight with someone on a BART train, and the guy followed him off the BART train, beat the crap out of him, stole his backpack, and walked away. Used to get beat up all the time. And I joke with him. Well, I ride public transportation everywhere too. But I sit down and little old ladies start talking about God with me. I'm not making this up. Oh, where do you go to church? Oh, yes. Did you pray? You know, I'm blessed today. I hear this all the time. Karma, karma. So we build a life. Now, on the other hand, if you think that the goal of life is to screw people over, to get away with as much as you can, to cheat, lie, steal, you are deluded. And karmically, that will come back to you. I cannot tell you how many people I know get arrested, thrown in jail for drunk driving, and are convinced it's bad luck. I have a problem with the police. They never think they have a problem with driving while drunk. Delusion, illusion. Many of us may know people whose lives are a wreck because of stupid, ignorant, deluded decisions. Things like the way to solve my bills is never open them and just keep them in a pile on the table. Guess what happens? Then they shut the lights off and then you have to pay late charges and all that kind of nonsense. Young people who think, oh, credit card, free money. The next thing you know, they're $10,000, $15,000 in debt. Delusion, illusion. Poor choices made because of dumbness. People who think, I can be a recreational heroin user. Illusion. Any thoughts on this? So our actions are impelled by the quality of our mind, and the fruits of action will come back to us. So that's why a yogi puts the quarter in the parking meter. Not because he's afraid or she's afraid, but it's righteous action. And you never have to worry about a parking ticket if you put money in the meter. I was talking with a person this morning, and their boyfriend feels cheated by the government, makes a lot of money, has to pay a lot of income tax. So he's looking for a way to swindle the government, see if he can get away without paying so much tax. Now, if he can find legitimate legal ways to do it, knock yourself out, good for you. But if you're cheating, first of all, your mind's going to be filled with fear because you think you're going to get caught. Then it very likely at some point will come back. Next verse.
Sattvat sanjayate jnanam rajaso lobha eva cha pramad mohau tamaso bhavato jnanameva cha. Knowledge arises from sattva, greed from rajas, heedlessness, delusion, and ignorance from tamas.
So when my mind is predominantly sattvic, if it's pure sattva, Atma Vidya arises, knowledge of the self. But the quiet mind is the clearest mind, the most powerful mind. So, for example, Shweta, you're an academic. What's been your experience about how successful a student is who basically is happy and peaceful, lives a comparatively pure life, and is able to suit up and show up and do the work? By and large, they're successful. And I'm sure you've had students who have whole bunches of problems
Yes.
come to you for counseling, but it's very difficult to be academically successful when the mind is agitated. Isn't that your experience?
Yes.
And then I'm sure you've had students who think, she's a pushover, will never come to class, will never do any homework, and expect to pass the course.
Oh, all the time. All the time.
And then what happens? What kind of grade do they?
I don't know if it's something about me, but they really expect to get away with it, and they have a very, very rude surprise in the end.
Yes, that's called tamas. Yes. Now that's just academia, but it's throughout the whole society. I have a very dear friend who was a personal assistant, and he was permitted to work from home. But what did he do for 4 hours a day? On his phone, going through social media. Well, guess what? He got laid off. Karma phala. So here, what Krishna is saying is the qualities of our mind determine our actions, which then determine the fruits of our actions. Sattva, happiness, clarity, knowledge is the fruit. Rajas, greed, fear, suffering is the fruit. Tamas, heedlessness, delusion, illusion is the fruit. Next verse.
Urdhavam gachanti sattvastha madhye tistanti rajasaha jagyanya gunavrittistha adho gachanti tamasaha. Those who are abiding in sattva go upwards, the rajasic dwell in the middle, and the tamasic, abiding in the function of the lowest guna, go downwards.
So this is allegorical. It again can mean what happens after death. Those whose minds are predominantly sattvic go to some punya loka, some swarga, and have a better life next time. The rajasic, they stay in the middle. Well, this didn't work. Let me try another life with another set of desires. Tamasic, the heedless, go further down the scale of evolution. Now, just in our lives, in this world, if you live a life of integrity, if you live a life according to the Dharma, if you act in an estimable way, chances are the quality of your life will continue to improve, and the fruits of your action will be more success. If, on the other hand, you live a life rooted in fear and greed, yeah, let me give you a real live story. Many, many years ago, I had a very famous voice teacher who was a world-class singer. And when I was young, I was deeply afflicted by stage fright, performance anxiety. And what he told me is that's a function of self-absorption. Your mind is concerned about what other people think of you. Where your mind is not is on the music and communicating. And then he said there's three kinds of performance anxiety. One, when you're not prepared. Two, when you're not technically capable of doing what the music demands. And the third is just excitement with the brakes on, that we all get. You don't take care of the first two, you have no chance of dealing with the third. So again, it's so obvious if we think about it. So if you have a sattvic mind and you act with integrity and generosity and the spirit of service, Krishna says you go upward, meaning your life improves and you have more satisfaction with life. On the other hand, you're acting from greed and fear. You kind of stumble from crisis to crisis. And if you're tamasic, if you lack integrity, if you lie, cheat, and steal, on subtle as well as gross levels, your life will continue to be one of conflict, suffering. Now, in every life, the force of the past can give us surprises. So, for example, in 2000, out of the blue, my retinas start to hemorrhage and I lose most of my sight. Why? I don't know. I can speculate with some reasons, but the bottom line, force of the past maturing. No point in worrying about it. It's what is now. How can I use this as Ramdas used to say, grist for the mill? What can I learn from it? What spiritual lessons can it teach me? So a sattvic mind finds everything in life useful. All right, we'll end here. What verse are we on for next week?
19.
19. All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.